Hello, everyone. Integrating Real Perspective back again in the Film Critic Corner to review Ty West's X Trilogy. So, as for those of you who saw my short reel that I put up yesterday, I saw the third and concluding chapter in that trilogy, MaXXXine. And so I'm going to also be reviewing both X and Pearl, the other two films in that trilogy. And to dive into this review, I actually wanted to quote a line from a movie called Dangerous Beauty from 1998 because I feel that there is a relevance to this trilogy in that um, the themes are basically updated from what was talked about in the movie Dangerous Beauty. So, for those of you who haven't seen that film, it's about a woman who is being hounded down by the Catholic Church for offering sex services and basically was written off as being a prostitute and a whore. But the deal is that there is one line from that movie that has resounded with me for the last 3 years, ever since I saw that film. It's the line where she's at her trial and she's saying, I confess that I find more ecstasy in passion than in prayer. And I really feel that that line challenges um, the evolutionary theory with regards to sex, because that movie was challenging the narrow-minded motion or the narrow-minded notion that sex is entirely based on bearing children, which of course is just nonsense. I mean, especially there are men, who have no interest in bearing children because, I mean, we're children. Like I'm definitely still an adult child within this 38-year-old male body here. And the psychological nurturing of pleasuring a woman while reciprocating that pleasure back to me is something that helps to nourish the divine child, which both exists within myself and the woman. Healing that child must come first before it can even be possible to make children in a biological sense. That's the spiritual view of sex. And that's the tantric and the Taoist view of sex. And I just feel that the biological view on sex is stupid and banal, to say the least. But anyways, um the uh the notion of sex as power and sex as a means of finding finding your most authentic self is something that was explored in Ty West's X trilogy. Now, whereas like another A24 movie, the Ty West's trilogy, of course, is from the A24 studios, but like another A24 movie that I had reviewed earlier in the year, Red Rocket, which looked at the porn industry in more of that more of that sense of needing to fulfill a certain hunger, but doing it in a way that comes off as desperate. The X trilogy focuses on pornography in more of a light as far as like attaining personal power, of achieving stardom, and of course this is the word that is used very often by the dual characters in this trilogy, which are both Pearl and Maxine. And of course, I will get into those characters as this review rolls along here. But for those who have seen the trilogy, it's the line is that both Maxine and Pearl say is, "You're a fucking star." It's it's definitely a metaphor for charisma right there. If you ever read about charisma in Antero Ali's Angel Tech, that's essentially what defines a star, is how much charisma you have. Our light body naturally emanates this charisma based off of how we are able to use that energy in a way to influence others. And, so that's why, um, really, even though pornography is the centerpiece of this, it's really all about these two girls who have a shared existence across three different time periods that are looking for that stardom and success. Now, of course, I say this with conviction because most people focus only on the slasher horror element of it and not the foundation upon which the slasher horror element is an adverse reaction to the foundational subject matter. I certainly noticed that when I first watched X in particular. This was early last year that I watched this movie. The first hour of this movie is a bunch of filmmakers and upcoming actors taking up residence at a remote farm in Texas to film a porn movie. Ah, but that's so boring. I want to see more violence, blood, and gore. I want to see some psycho killers on a murder spree. That's the type of typical reaction that a lot of these mainstream fans have. It's the violence they're looking for. That's the typical movie watcher who views this movie. Boy, how astonishing that there hasn't been some brainwashing program invented to eliminate stupidity and one-dimensional thinking from movie watchers. Such savagery. I mean, I tend to see sex as a beautiful and blissful event, and that's how X starts out. Although it's really about the politics and the variety of perspectives that the people have towards sex and the value towards sex. But let's set up the stage for what this trilogy is all about. So, there are two primary characters that these three films spotlight: Pearl and Maxine. Maxine starts out as an aspiring porn star who still hides an insecurity underneath that makes her confidence come off as, well, pretty stiff and artificial. But, in X, she's still young and naive and isn't really prepared for the hard work and all the controversy she's going to draw from those who are less evolved and less understanding. But fast forward from 1979, which is the time period in which X is set in, to 1985, which is when Maxine is set, and you see a much more softer, humbler, wiser, more relaxed Maxine. And that just comes from having arisen from all the violence and carnage she witnessed prior, while her film crew and fellow co-stars were down in Texas. Basically, what happened in the events in the movie X was that they went to this, they went to this farming property that was owned by two elderly people, and that would be Howard and Pearl. And Pearl at this point is just this very mysterious, almost phantom-like character who just kind of drifts in and out of the scene. I mean, even Howard seems pretty enigmatic, and we rarely get any glimpse, good shots of his face. But early on, it's pretty evident that he does not like these people. He, has suspicions about these people, even though he doesn't really know as of yet what they're going to be doing. Until, of course, Pearl comes by and witnesses Maxine having her first sex scene. So, so anyways, in comparison to that, in Maxine, she's the title character is now prepared for how vicious and demanding Hollywood will soon be. Since at this point now in 1985, she now is trying to open up her world more and graduate from making adult films to getting into mainstream cinema. I mean, how many other real life celebrities have we seen start out in pornography and then gradually get into mainstream cinema? Sylvester Stallone, Cameron Diaz, Simon Rex, like the aforementioned Red Rocket that I referenced earlier. There's a lot of famous stars who actually did get their start in pornography, yeah. And that's basically what Maxine here is trying to do. She still has a very tough skin, regardless of how aggressive Hollywood gets, especially Elizabeth Debicki's character in that film. I really loved Elizabeth Debicki in this movie, by the way. Um, Having seen her in some other stuff too, she was perfect to play the role as Maxine's casting agent. And anyways, Maxine is a porn star who stands up for herself and knows what she's all about. And she'll take down anyone, and I mean anyone who is a threat to her life. Pearl, on the other hand, was dealt a bad hand and unfortunately never recovered from the trauma of her past. The movie Pearl was set in 1918, which was depicting the events that were going on during World War One. There was the influenza flu pandemic that was going on at that time, and it was a time in which she was basically pressured by the norms of society to be a certain someone in order to become famous. Basically, she was made to feel worthless and never amount to anything beyond being just a plain farm girl. She ends up murdering those who wronged her, including her parents. So basically, it's like the reverse of what happened in the Brian De Palma movie Carrie. Carrie doesn't get, pulled into the undertow with her mother like she actually murders her parents. But then, of course, even though she becomes free, she continues to live the rest of her life in bitterness, contempt, and envy towards those most fortunate. She wanted to be a dancer, you see, one of those Tiller girls. And she obviously was very passionate about it, especially because of her passion for the movies. She would go to see movies, or what she would call, I'm going to the pictures. And, just dream of having that life, where she could be a star. But that's the thing, because I don't think that she had enough authenticity um to really write, or I guess rewrite, her own story, her own social scripts. So I mean, the the same contempt for life continues in X, in which she resorts to murder because of her spite towards anything and anyone more beautiful, because she still carries the imprint of shame and guilt that her mother left on her. Maxine, grew up under the influence of an evangelical father, but at least she managed to escape and later on even kills him. Okay, spoiler alert. That's exactly what happens because he ends up re entering her life again in the third act of Maxine, um, as someone who was going to destroy everything that she worked hard for. And he's the guy who disguises himself as the Night Stalker in the film. At one point, he ends up capturing Maxine and plans on televising an exorcism in which he would try to pressure his daughter to save herself or suffer being burned with the mark of the pentagram, which he defines as the devil's seal. She, of course, would not stand for that. And fortunately, she had a strong support system from her agent, and eventually even two cops backed her up. Michelle Monaghan plays one of those cops, and she was really fantastic in this film too. Um, so was Lily Collins, even though she had such a very, very brief role in this film. I loved her in this film. Um, Now, again, to reiterate back again to the subject of pornography, while pornography is a core topic that's explored in these three films, it really becomes more of a doorway inside a mysterious house where you discover that there's more to it than just pleasure. It's a storehouse of values, things that you feel will offer you the richest and most resourceful emotional state that you can reach. It's not just simply about getting some. There is also hard work and emotional honesty, really taking a good look at yourself and disassembling all the things which were conditioned into you so as to find the real you and find a place to carve your identity in the world, that so that you are always supported. That's also why, this Maxine movie circles back to the moments in X where you see the television playing and it's her father who's preaching to his followers about how Maxine has gone astray and wants to try to save her with God's loving light. Even, putting a picture of her on display as if to humiliate her from a distance. It's really, really sad. And it gets even worse in Maxine when we discover that he goes under the guise of the Night Stalker, Night Watcher, and is leading this satanic cult that kills porn stars. It just goes to show that, I mean, the demonizing of sexuality outside of procreation still continues to this day, although it's great that we have Ty West's trilogy to bring awareness to this. And I think, Maxine is obviously becoming a role model for a lot of those sex workers out there, those OnlyFans girls, and especially the Gen Zers now who have a very, very free-spirited approach to sexuality. In fact, it was actually a Gen Zer that first brought up uh, Pearl to me. And, as I read deeper into that film, I realized, oh, okay, so that's why the generation ahead of me is into this movie. And by default, the other two movies from the trilogy as well, because because now we live in an age where it's like this generation is going against the rules, whereas like, the millennials have worked hard to break down the rules that were forced on us so as to really reinvent ourselves. And um that's what makes these particular movies really, really special now for me, I feel, where it's like it's obviously much more easier now to have sex in a very, very casual way, with no strings attached. But it still means, of course, that while it is important to find love there, it's also essential to know too that there is going to be a lot of hard work in order to then build authentic connections with other people, which I mean is something that Maxine has been learning about over the course of the last two movies in particular. Um, the like I still think about the scene in X where Brittany Snow's character is talking about how um like she's talking about the difference between love and sex, that like um love is something that you choose, but you can basically have sex with just about anybody. Yeah. So I think that's a very, very interesting theme that's played around with too. And just like confronting jealousy and lack of inhibitions, like the film director in X, who is the first one to be killed by Pearl, because I mean, what started out was he just got jealous of the fact that his girlfriend, Jenna Ortega's character, wanted to step out of her shy, religiously puritanical um self and take more risks. Anyway, I really, really love this trilogy though. But I will say, while I do love the trilogy as a whole, Pearl is actually my least favorite of the three. Now, the first 40 minutes of it are spectacular, but then I can feel the film's emotional weight getting too heavy, as if basically I'm drowning in Pearl's psychological breakdown, her psychological undertow. It just really gets to be too much. Whereas MaXXXine was a much needed breath of fresh air, much more slower paced, much more relaxed to watch. Much of that film feels like you're daydreaming with the lush, soft, lo-fi 1980s graphics and scenery. I did also enjoy the world that each of these three films occupied. I the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was obviously referenced a lot when describing X. Personally, I've never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I mean, I've seen enough clips in passing just over the years that yeah, I can kind of see where that comparison is relevant. And I think that using the 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 backdrop of horror as sort of a dark mirror to examine like the just um the dark untold secrets that go on during the making of a porn movie, by also giving it that classic 1970s soft core um movie look to it. I think blends in really, really well with the horror aspect of it to just convey that push pull between between seeking paradise while at the same time also being threatened by the more lower animalistic forces outside of that, especially since uh, hardcore Christian fundamentalists are out there trying to stop these people from experiencing true pleasure and enjoyment. And so it's like, the elderly couple, even, the clerk at the grocery store that both both Maxine and her boyfriend were at, was giving them very, very weird looks when, talking about sex, even in just a very nonchalant way. Um, it just goes to show like the the dark demons that people hide away that they then project onto otherwise very, very innocent people who are just trying to, seek out the good life through pornography. Now, looking at Pearl, we have the backdrop of The Wizard of Oz, where Pearl is, searching for that Oz through musical theater. And unfortunately, because she didn't live up to the expectations of the judges that were reviewing her dance piece, she unfortunately never made it to her personal Oz as a result, and instead just basically went the Carrie route. Maxine, I would say maybe the player, the Tim Robbins movie, even though that movie came out in the early 90s. Um, or maybe The Big Easy with Dennis Quaid and Ellen Barkin. I think maybe that's the backdrop in which Maxine is set against. I definitely know that it's got a very, very noir, a film noirish element to it for sure. Um, but obviously, it embodies a lot of the new wave and glam rock aesthetics to it. So parts of it actually kind of remind me of Phantom of the Paradise, like even the dance club scene where Kevin Bacon, the private investigator who's actually got some pretty evil scheme up his sleeve too, is chasing Maxine through the crowd. And Maxine's got this really, really cool David Bowie-ish pink face makeup on. And there's also a really cool chase scene through the Bates Motel set from Psycho, obviously, which I thought was pretty neat as well. So yeah, I would definitely say it just pulls from a little bit of everything that was popular in the 80s. It's hard to pin down the influence for that film. It feels more like a greatest hits cinematic collection of 80s nostalgia. But yeah, so so those are my thoughts on the X trilogy. I haven't seen any of Ty West's other stuff, but I am very impressed with the vision that he had going going into this film trilogy. And yeah, there is another famous line that resounds through all three of these movies. Well, actually, mainly through X. No, I'm sorry. Actually, yeah, all three movies. So I had evaluated the line, "I am a fucking star." Well, the other famous line in the movie is, "I will not accept a life I do not deserve." Well, how I look at that line is through the lens of making that bridge from fourth, uh, you know, fourth circuit social intelligence to fifth grade somatic intelligence. Again, going back, referencing Antero Ali's eighth circuit model, or his eighth circuit model from Angel Tech. What is being portrayed here in these three movies with that line, "I will not accept a life I do not deserve," is Maxine's um, protest against the conservative Christians that have suppressed her desire to be her own goddess, rather than disassociating and looking towards God as someone who keeps track of keeps the tallies of every sparrow that falls, to quote Carl Sagan. Maxine basically wanted to escape from that religious conditioning, and on a more macrocosmic level, transforming her social intelligence at circuit number 4, so as to prolong adolescence while also growing successfully into childhood, so as to perpetuate this eternal youth within herself. Now, if you read Angel Tech by Antero Ali, you'll understand where I'm coming from. Because, see, fourth grade social intelligence is all about seeking approval from others so that you are not an outcast, so that you are not a pariah, a nomad, or just a social misfit. But it's the reinvention stage after she goes through her own personal chapel perilous, which as she crosses through, brings her into a state of being reborn into a higher level of consciousness development that is post survival. She has to use her star power to influence a new audience of fans so as to create this new reality where she is given fame and fortune. Now, Chapel Perilous here, I'm just going to show you because I can't find any online PDFs here, but this is the chapter from the book, the copy that I have of Angel Tech, which talks about Chapel Perilous. And there's 7 sermons in here. Also, I thought this illustration was pretty cool. um, the 7 sermons in this book describe the process of rebirth into a higher consciousness. 2 in particular apply to Maxine. So they are sermon number 5, The Philosopher's Dilemma, and sermon number 6, Heaven and Hell. Now, as observed in Maxine, Goth's character carries herself with confidence. And while she's vague about what she wants in life, other than saying she wants to live the good life, it's apparent that her body language exudes this philosophy of live and let live, which is implied by Sermon 5, because she she's not somebody that's thinking too much. She's not somebody that lives outside of her body. See, philosophy, as described here, is the human way of referring to things mystical. And while Ty West's movies are not really mystical, I feel like the visual style of these movies implies something very, very mystical, something that's going on behind the scenes, something that's going on within the psyche of Maxine. And so in her case, with regards to the philosopher's dilemma, she's learned not to simply let her dreams exist inside her head whilst never having anything physical and tangible for others to exalt for lifetimes to come. She ventured into porn. That was the beginning of her journey in X, specifically to ground her philosophy in her body. Literally, she became her own body of beliefs, going against the grain of what her evangelicalist father, who is revealed to be Ernest Miller, that's the official name he's given in MaXXXine, by realizing I'm not going to live a life that's just very, very literalist, where I have to do things according to a certain order that society has laid out for me. And that's where I come to Sermon 6, Heaven and Hell, which her final confrontation with her dad and Kevin Bacon's character, the private investigator John Labatt, who is actually working with Ernest Miller behind the scenes, the night stalker, confirms that these are people who will not let go of their jealousy and contempt towards her rising stardom. Notice the beams of light coming down here from the light fixture. Their ideas of hell conflict with Maxine's ideas of heaven. It's fundamentalist Christians who continue to live a primitive way of existence whose aim is to crush Maxine's divine right to find pleasure in the flesh, which causes such trauma. And in fact, I believe it is here in Sermon 6 that or hold on here, was it oh, actually, um Sermon 3 here applies a little bit. Sermon 3 is called the Egyptian Dream. Now, to me, I think it's implied, though it's not seen in the movies, particularly in X. But somehow I wonder if Maxine was in an insane asylum at some point, or if maybe the church that she belonged to was kind of like a Scientology type, in which if she broke the rules, she would be kept in like this crawl space underneath the floors. Um, but I noticed that like one of the questions that's asked here in Sermon 3 is how many must resort to dogmatic emotionalism to communicate their truths, which I do think carries on into Sermon 6 because of course there's the discussion about spiritual awakening that comes through atomic penetration. Atomic penetration is essentially sex in the spiritual realm as we know it. It's the joining of two people and the exchange of kundalini or chi energy or whatever kind of energy, whatever label you want to attach to it. But the umbrella term is atomic energy because it's really the most tangible way of describing that exchange of sexual energy on a microcosmic level. So this isn't the atomic bomb, though on a microcosmic level, the emotional dogmatism that occurs from certain individuals who are not accepting towards those who just want to experience ecstasy in pleasure is akin to an atomic bomb going off, but invisibly. So, anyways, to go back to what I was saying about, um, MaXXXine's ideas of heaven and hell, they are definitely the reverse of what people like her father and Kevin Bacon's private investigator character like to preach. You know, for for these people, like crushing her divine right to find pleasure in the flesh, porn was just the beginning. It's recognizing her body and her innate beauty that she begins to become a microcosm of the macrocosm, meaning that when she gets to fifth grade sensory intelligence, the world becomes a playground where others join in to indulge in rapture and to get high and to share the charisma and star power with others. Because ultimately, Maxine just wants to inspire others to become their own stars. And, that's where, um, like the charisma training here, as you can see in fifth grade sensory intelligence, there's a line here that says, um, brace yourself. You are entering the process of becoming a positive threat to society. Prepare to win friends and disarm your enemies. That's because fifth grade sensory intelligence is about the sensory absorption of being here now. It's Ram Dass's philosophy that's embodied in this film. The absorption of being here now strengthens spatial awareness while diminishing the linear sense of time. Everything turns now. And I think that final end credit scene in MaXXXine says it all as, the camera lifts up above the earth and we see the universe in all of its glory as a metaphor that now MaXXXine has opened up to the eternal. And she hopes that there are going to be other rising stars who are going to reach up to the universe, to the infinite. So, this is what brings me now to the actress herself, Mia Goth. So, I haven't watched that many of Mia's movies, but because prior to Maxine, I only saw her in Nymphomaniac Part 2 and Suspiria. And in those movies, she was rather shy and reserved. But, she still had a bite to her that you wouldn't really recognize until it's unleashed at the moment that you expect it, that the least expect it. But as Maxine and Pearl, she knows a wider she shows a wider range of emotions, from quiet to loud, from glamorous to histrionic, from ruthless and cunning to loving and compassionate. And she's quite a fighter through it all in true Scorpio fashion. As of this review, though, I did just read up that both Mia and Ty are being sued by a background actor named James Hunter. So it seems that James was brutally assaulted and degraded by Mia during the production of Maxine, and that the poor guy had to write down the events of what happened to him because he was too lightheaded and delirious after suffering a concussion from Mia kicking him in the head. That's pretty serious. Yikes. Actually makes me wonder now if Mia had a hard time stepping out of her character in between takes and that she let her own narcissism get to her head. Like Mia Goth couldn't separate herself from Maxine. I don't, I haven't really found much about her style as to whether she's a method actor or comes from the Stanislavski method or the Sanford Meisner method, but something maybe I'll have to look into more. And we'll just have to see how this story develops. Until then, I do like Mia. Her deep, mysterious eyes are a big part of why she had such a profound impact as an actress. She can say so much with just a glance, and you can already use your imagination to picture what her inner world is like instantly. Yeah. And it's full of light and dark, but also many different bold colors and shapes. And the way she talks in interviews is always really exciting to see. Yeah. And so, yeah, okay, so that finally wraps up this review on the X Trilogy. Yeah. I know that this was a longer review and it kind of like a greatest hits compilation of all the best things of these movies. I don't really see myself reviewing these three movies individually. Not like I'm going to be doing for the MonsterVerse movies. I've got my Godzilla Kong, the New Empire poster banner up now. Those movies I'm going to be reviewing individually. Ty West's X Trilogy seems pretty simple to explain as a whole, that I don't think the individual movies need much reviewing for me, anyways. That might change, but for the moment, I feel pretty satisfied with this review series here of these three movies. And um, I would say that I haven't left anything out according to my own interpretation of it. So, yeah. And with that in mind, once more, I am going to be showing off Mega Media Exchange. Shout out to this wonderful business. That this is a business that has helped me to reach the stars. I'm trying to touch this beam of light here. Divine intervention. And yeah, so also I will be putting my link down below for the ISTA school out in Arizona, the Tantra school that I am looking to fundraise my YouTube content for so that I can visit that school. And so, yeah, in the meantime, my fellow reelers, thank you so much once more for your support and stay tuned for my next review. See you on the flip side of the reel. As always, ciao.